Insurgency is basically a political problem.
Yep.
So if you want to sort out an insurgency, you have to sort out the politics of it. After
Right.
all, insurgents are your people, and they have gone against the government. Because they feel they haven't got their due. What we did in 71, where a
Okay.
parachute battalion was dropped near just on the outskirts of Dhaka at Tangail, and they captured a bridge there.
Okay.
And it brought pressure onto the Pakistani headquarters, thinking that you're getting surrounded from all sides and these troops have come in here.
We love doing the defense podcast on the iRonik show. It's not just the stories or the experiences that they have, it's what you get to learn from this. There's so much to learn about leadership qualities, about being a good human being. Today we have another army veteran on the iRonik show, Brigadier Deepak Sinha. He has been part of the Indian Paratrooper forces and has served extensively in Northeast and J&K. This is more about the insurgents, the militant activities in J&K. Having served on the ground, his experiences and his stories are to the point and gives you a clear picture of what was going on in J&K during 95-96 when he was posted out there. Enjoy this podcast with Brigadier Deepak Sinha. Thank you. Brigadier Deepak Sinha, sir, thank you so much for your time and for being on the iRonik show. We have been waiting for you on the iRonik show. We wanted to we want to know a lot of stories from you, your army experience, your paratrooping experience. Thank you so much, sir, for your time.
Thank you, Ronik. It's a pleasure, and actually, I'm glad you got hold of me, and I've been able to share some things with you. Anyway,
So I hope my T-shirt color goes with the theme of the evening.
absolutely, absolutely. My shirt doesn't though, but doesn't matter.
At least one of us does. Okay. Uh, Sir, I would straight away jump onto. So you have served as a brigadier in the Indian Army. So you have a lot of experience of special forces and paratrooping in Northeast and Jammu and Kashmir regions, which are two of the most hostile terrains in. I mean, if I have to speak that way, sir, I would like to know about the Jammu and Kashmir terrain. So before we get deep into the paratrooping experience, I would like to know what exactly is going on there, and what do you think is the future? I mean, when it comes to JNK and POK overall, and what has changed after Article 370?
Right. Okay. Let me put it this way. We all know the history to the whole thing, right? In 1989,
Right.
the or 87 or something, the elections happened. The elections were fixed. They were rigged. The people who actually won, the Jamaati Islam, who actually won the elections, were not allowed to come into power. So you had a lot of people who were very upset,
Hmm.
and then they were preyed on by the Pakistanis, and they started a militancy, right?
Right.
That happened in 89. By 89, by 90, it had reached such a stage where the pundits were thrown out of the valley and stuff like that, and then the government brought in the army, and the situation started to stabilize. Now that stabilization took a fair amount of time. I mean, people will say that it's not yet stabilized, but that's how insurgencies go. Insurgencies don't
Right.
normally finish in 4 or 5 years. They normally, an average insurgency doesn't go less than 30, 40 years. Right? It's a long drawn out thing, and it has a lot of uh, threads which you need to. I mean, you have, say, Nagaland, where we've been at it now for nearly 60, 70 years.
Yeah.
Okay. So now Kashmir, uh, there are two parts to it. The initial part from say till around 96, 97, when you had the first time you could actually hold elections, was because between 90 and 96, the army was in full flow. It, the,
Hmm.
the, the militants were meeting, I mean, they were being, the clashes taking place nearly every day. You had around 2,000 odd militants dying every year on an annual basis. And there were supposed to be about 7 to 8,000 militants who were operating in the valley at that time. And I'm just talking about the valley. You had also Rajouri and stuff like that. And the units available at that time were very limited because you had you quickly brought in some units and they were doing the thing, and they had a thing going there. By 97, the violence had been brought down, area domination had become predominant, and the army was in control. So you were able to, in 96, you were able to organize, I think 96 it was, that you organized the general elections. Very few Kashmiris actually voted.
Okay.
But in 97, again, you organized the state elections where a few more numbers increasingly voted. A lot of the people who couldn't vote were also scared of what the militants would do to them because there was a fair amount of threat.
Right.
But between 97 onwards, the situation improved. It improved to such an extent that by 99, the Pakistanis realized that they were losing control, and which is why they did the Kargil operations. So Kargil created two problems. And if you recall Kargil, they said that militants in top. So Kargil created two problems. First, it created a vacuum in the valley because you pulled out a lot of troops from there and moved them up to deal with which we were not very sure what Kargil was about. And we initially also thought it may have been militants, but later realized that it was actually Pakistani army which had come. So 99 Kargil, that is one problem that was created. And so that gap which happened, the vacuum which it created, gave militants a chance to regroup and restart. However, because Kargil ended the way it did with us actually being victorious and forcing the Pakistanis out, and the fact that the US was then able to convince the Pakistanis to stay out of India, out of Kashmir for some time at least, so those things carried on. Now, what you have to understand with any insurgency is that insurgency is basically a political problem.
Yep.
So if you want to sort out an insurgency, you have to sort out the politics of it. After all, insurgents are your people, and they have gone against the government. Because they feel they haven't got their due, or the democratic systems are not working in their favor. That's how it works, basically.
Right.
That's how the initial Kashmiri insurgency happened. So even should I say that in Punjab it was also to a certain extent that kind of thing, though it was slightly different, obviously. But in Kashmir, when we're talking about it, so what happened after that is that if you look at a political solution, what used to happen is that the governments which were there along the line, from 97 onwards, is the moment the army is to control the situation, the politicians would get down to not doing anything about actually sorting out the problem. I have in some of my writings called it the business of insurgency. Because if you keep a low-key insurgency going, then there is no accountability. The people, nobody's coming to audit your documents. Nobody is coming, you're not going into the field. And so it suits a lot of people. There are a lot of stakeholders it suits. More funds are given to that state to control things. That gives you an opportunity for more corruption. So there's a whole lot of things involved in this. So it suits stakeholders to keep a low-key insurgency going anywhere. So that's why I call it a business of insurgency. Actually, it's a business. It's a proper business. So what happens is, so the first actual political movement that ever happened was Article 370 abolition or whatever you want to call it, whatever it is. But practical terms, it's abolition of the Article 370. So that gave the government an opportunity to bring about a political solution. Now, sadly, the part of that where things have gone a bit wrong is that the government was, especially Mr. Modi and all, Prime Minister Modi took the very strong decision of doing away with Article 370, but they didn't follow through. The follow through was even a higher risk, but the follow through meant that you take away the army, that act which you have, which protects the army there. So the army, you could have pulled the army out, withdrawn the army, put it on the borders, because by the time we did this, the actual insurgency had died down. From locals, it had died down. Only people from across the border were coming in. Nobody could attack them, or nobody would give away their positions, but they didn't have that support of the people, because the people were very clear that they're not going to win, and they wanted
Right.
peace. They wanted their peace at the end of it. And so this was an ideal opportunity where a bit more needed to have been done. Surprisingly or unfortunately, the government was not able to push through that. Maybe the government, maybe the army, because there's a fair amount of the army which says that, look, we get out from here and then some things go wrong, then it's a restart back to zero and we have to start again, which is not wrong, but it is also there are times when you have to take the lead. I mean, it's a basic premise that you have to work on. So you have to be more optimistic about how things would work out. But this is where the things stand. So we've been going around in circles. We are again going around in circles. Shall I say that now the insurgency is under control? There is very quiet. When I'm talking about a time when you had 2,000 militants dying annually, and now you have not more than 100, 150, maybe 50, 60 being neutralized in a year. So you can imagine how scale of how low it's become.
So, what was the year when you served in J&K?
I was there from I think around 95 to 97.
So, I think it was peak of this insurgency that you're speaking about, and also the Kashmir exodus also happened around I think just maybe a couple of years before that, around early 1990s.
Yeah, but
So
it was
you
not the peak. It by that time we had started to come to grips with the militants. We had a lot of
okay?
information about them, and we were able to in 95 when we came in. We had a fairly, yes, there was a lot of still action happening. I mean, my unit must have neutralized about 150, 200 odd militants, but we had, I mean, there's certainly things that started going down. The scale had started going down. We had the problem of trying to convince people to go out and vote, give them the feeling of security that, okay, when you go for the voting, we'll ensure that no militants ever target you after that.
Hmm.
It is very difficult to convince somebody who's been in, for 5-7 years of intense military actions where a lot of violence is happening, a lot of people are getting affected, civilians are getting, I mean, they've become casualties without being there. I mean, they just sort of one of those things that happen. And the militants don't have a system to follow. We have the army at least has a
You're right.
proper system in place. So you have
Absolutely.
the judiciary at the end. You are accountable to everybody. The militants don't have that. So if they threaten somebody and they say we'll shoot you, they can shoot you within a minute. I mean, it's up to the chap's mood, let's say. So those things count. So that's how it was. I mean, we weren't really in the. It was not. I would not say the peak, but it was at a plateau, and it started going down.
Yeah. So around so just early 1900s, sorry 1990s, when the Kashmir exodus happened, when Kashmiri Pandits were pulled, I mean they came out of Kashmir and all that, and you went there in 1995, 96.
Yeah,
So
95.
when you were there, so because you had a feeling of the on ground, I'm not talking about militants, I'm not talking about insurgents coming from from that side of the border or anything. I'm just talking about the people of Kashmir, right? So what was their thoughts when it came to Indian army or Indian government at large, and how has there been a shift in the mindset of the people now?
Okay, I don't think the people initially have always been a bit anti-India, should I say, or I would say they've been not too happy with the situation uh, for a fairly long time. But if you recall in 1948, after the problems happened there and the raiders came in, they were helped by the Indian army. So there was and they had a lot of problems. A lot of their women were traumatized because of the raiders and the way they behaved and the looting and all which these people
Right.
indulged. So there was a feeling among a vast majority of the population, which was, there was no anger against it, but it still felt that you were outside the place, right? You were outsiders to an extent. Now, I've had the good fortune of having served 3 years in Kashmir in the 70s, when it was absolutely peace and we were located in Srinagar. So I've dealt with a lot of Kashmiris there, and it was a very good time then. It's unfortunate that this election thing happened, and it just upset a lot of things at that time in 1989.
Okay. Sir, now talking about your experiences in J&K Valley, right? So since you are part of the paratrooper, right? Paratrooper of the Indian Army. So what exactly is the role of a paratrooper, and during war, how it comes handy, and what is the what is the role of your unit?
Okay, let me put it this way: there are, in the special forces, there are two types of para battalions. One is called the para special forces, which is used to operating in small teams, that is 5-6 people at a time,
Right.
and it's spread out over a lot of places, and it provides you with a varied amount. In conventional warfare, they do a lot of other stuff, something akin to what the special forces of or say the SAS or the special forces of the Americans or somebody else does like that.
Hmm.
That is one type of battalion. So they operate in very small numbers, they spread out, and they basically operate to get you information. Their job is
Right.
to pick up information. Their job is, in some cases, to raid a headquarter, maybe, but primarily their job is to set the battlefield. So they get the information. They work with. They are supposed to be able to work with, with if in that area, like in say, if they had to operate in Tibet, where the Tibetans are against the Chinese government, so then they would be working with the resistance forces. They would be giving them advice. They would support
Hmm.
them in how to go about putting an ambush or whatever. This is one type of unit. The other uh, para battalion, which is an airborne battalion, both are actually paratroopers, but it's called airborne modification. Now,
Right.
those battalions are heavy battalions. They operate their strength. Their basic job of both are to operate behind enemy lines. But the parachute battalion, the heavy battalion, operates. It occupies ground, and it stops, let's say, enemy reserves coming in towards the battlefield. Where suppose you we are launching an attack from somewhere along the
Hmm.
border, so they are dropped behind the enemy, the forward line,
Okay.
and
Okay.
what happens is when an attack goes in, and then automatically the enemy starts, he starts doing an appreciation and says, okay, this is where the attack is coming in, so he may bring in more forces to come in there, reserves he brings in. So this type of a force is used to stop those reserves coming. I'm putting it very simply. There are lots of
Yeah.
other work they can do, but this is, so they are a heavier unit, so they are
Okay.
capable of holding ground. They are meant to hold ground. They are capable of taking on armor. They have the ability to take on armor. They have the ability to take on other infantry. So the lighter units actually work, with deception and quiet and stuff like that. They do it in camouflage and stuff. The heavier units are more meant for the punch. They are actually your hard hitting. They'll go and sit somewhere and stop anything coming there. In the earlier days, in the plains, it used to be that, okay, there's a bridge, there's a canal somewhere or a bridge somewhere. You went and captured that, or you established a
Right.
bridgehead along a canal. You've read, if you've seen some of these movies like D-Day or whatever,
Yeah.
the Second World War, this thing, there is on Arnhem Bridge, there is a bridge too far and stuff. So you go and capture a bridge, and then wait for the ground forces to link up with you, and then they are able to use that bridge to get across. So that is the kind of job that they do. So they go in much deeper, and they do operate in a very sort of, they're capable of staying for some time, maybe 72 hours, 48 hours. A good example of this is what we did in 71, where a
Okay.
parachute battalion was dropped near just on the outskirts of Dhaka at Tangail, and they captured a bridge there.
Okay.
And it brought pressure onto the Pakistani headquarters, thinking that you're getting surrounded from all sides and these troops have come in here. There were troops stuck behind them, where there were because we came and interposed ourselves in between their troops and the Dhaka and their troops in front. So their troops in front couldn't get back. So those kind of things. That is the type of job that they do. So
Okay.
you have the parachute brigade, which is actually doing that job.
So, have you been in any sort of operation in J&K or Northeast where you have served?
J&K, in the sense of operations, means there are lots of operations because it's counterinsurgency.
Right.
Uh, Even in the northeast, it's counterinsurgency. So there are lots of operations going on at the same time. Maybe very small ones where you're going in for you get information about a single militant, or you get information about two or three militants. Normally, if you are controlling the area, if you are
Hmm.
dominating the area, then the number of militants who can operate will operate only in small groups, because the moment there is a larger group, they're in trouble. So you have two to three coming in somewhere, or maybe they met somewhere and then there are three, four sitting together, or maybe a few more sitting together. Yes, you have that sort of a thing. So there are lots of operations which happen. They're continuous. Actually, it's a continuous thing. On a given day, in I was commanding the battalion,
Yeah.
so in Kashmir. So on a given day, you could be having maybe 4 to 5 operations happening at the same time.
Wow.
So different companies, different elements are doing some different work and different areas. So they're operating all over the place. It's a 24-hour cycle. I mean, you're constantly on the move, because information comes to you at odd times from various places, and if you don't respond to that information, then the source will dry up, and it may not be a true source. I mean, it could be that he's giving you fraud information,
Hmm.
but at least if you don't try and respond to it, then if it is good information which happens once, say, in 100 times, so what happens is that a lot of your operations may be in the dark. You're hitting in the dark, but the odd one works out very well, and you're actually able to do something. It depends also on how good your intelligence structure you are able to set up. In our army, you have the infantry battalions, the para battalions, which are working on ground, which are sitting there, have their own intelligence. They establish their own intelligence sources. You don't depend so much on the higher headquarters, because the higher headquarters, the sources are not so. They may be very accurate. Some of it is very good, but by and large, it's very generalized. So you don't know exactly what will happen.
Right. When
You
it comes from the higher offices, it would be a more broader view of what they will have, and what when you're on the ground, it needs there needs to be small. If I have to put it like way, you need to cater to it in small packets.
right.
Right. So there could be an insurgency here. There could be maybe 5 kilometers down the road or 10 kilometers down the road. There could be another insurgency. So
Yeah,
those local information collection.
some insurgents are moving around that place. Some insurgents may be moving around 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers away.
Right.
Overall, what happens is that in a high level thing, the sources, say, from the intelligence agencies or from the military intelligence, or they pick up on electronic surveillance or whatever, they have certain amount of information they get, and so they come to know that broadly in this area there is a lot of insurgents moving around. So they can give you that insurgents information, but they give you a fairly broad area in which to operate,
Yeah.
which is, when you're at night, you can't see more than 5 feet, then even if you have 100 people, you're seeing, maybe 500 feet, or a kilometer at best, right?
Right.
So there you need to get your own intelligence to tell you, okay. So he tells you that these three villages there is something happening. So then you start building up and finding out information as to what is happening in those villages. You pick up sources, you make your own sources, and try and back up and find out specifics. Very few operations happen where the higher headquarters can give you specifics. They are there. It's happened before.
Okay. So without going too deep, I mean, whatever information can be shared on a public platform, how do you build these, information sources, and how do you identify, okay, this source is a trustworthy source, and this one, and whenever information comes in, how do you identify, how do you differentiate that, okay, this is a trustworthy source and I can believe on this and then act on it, and how do you also say, okay, this could be fake, and this could compromise my team.
Okay, a lot of things what happen is, uh, when you start getting information from somebody, it's somebody comes and drops off information, says I have seen militants in so and so place,
Huh.
or he says that you go to this village, this chap is there, he's a militant, he's working with the militants. Now what happens is some of that information is completely fake because it could be personal enmity between two people.
Yep.
So he would just say that, okay, so and so is there. Now, when you are new and you go into an area first and you don't have any sources and you start getting such information, then you start following it up. You go into action there, and then you, after you've talked to a chap, you've interrogated him, you've talked to him for some time, then you get and then you ask other people and you get to know that this is fake. Slowly, that this is why he's doing it. Then you start getting the picture. Sometimes the police are also helpful. They tell you, okay, this is what's going on. Initially, when you actually go into insurgency, normally the police is already compromised. They're not in a position to tell you anything. They're only in the barracks. They don't leave the barracks, so they don't have much information. They don't want to share information because their own families can get into trouble. So there is a whole lot of things that happen. So it is by slow and steady you build up. You have your spread out. You know what, we follow a grid system of deployment in which in 4 or 5 places next to villages you set up you have outposts, and those outposts are where people come. So somebody may come to that outpost while going past it, drop a message off and say acha aisa tha, or can I get some kind of help, or whatever is the thing. And a lot of people do it for money as well. So then you offer them
Okay.
money and say, okay, if you get me information, if he's showing some signs that he wants to give you information, so you get information like that. So fair amount of that is that. Initially, when we went into Kashmir, we had the benefit of the that time the number of militants was so high that each of the battalions which was there had a place where militants were held as a jail, sub jail, let's say, and that was legally it was set up there. The sub jail was set up in your unit location itself because the
Okay.
jails actually didn't have space to keep so many militants. So after you caught a chap, you kept him in the sub jail for some time, and then he went to the magistrate and whatever happened. And then if he was supposed to be in jail while his case was happening, especially if you had caught him with weapons, then he stayed there in that sub jail. So we had a sub jail in ours. We were in Shupia actually in that area, and, which is the hotbed of insurgency in South Kashmir. And so in our post where we had the sub jail, we had wired it up so we could pick up all conversations.
Okay.
So we got some information from that side. Then you have, which is normal. I mean, these are all these you see on TV series. I mean, these days. Then you have you put your radio sets on the frequencies which the militants use. And if you have a Kashmiri speaking guy or somebody who speaks Kashmiri or you have people who are done. So then you start getting information from them. So slowly you start correlating what they are talking about on their radio sets with the ground, and so you and incidents that happen, and so you come to know that okay, when he talks about some badam ka kucha somewhere and something happens in a village somewhere, you know that that has got some connection with. There are a whole lot of other techniques which you use, which today though even it's even better because you got a lot of you got drones, you got this, you got that.
Right.
I think they must be having a far better system of being able to eavesdrop, pick up stuff, information. One of the bigger this things that happen is that when you go each company say or each establishment outpost you set up, it has an area of responsibility. So there you go to these villages, which is in your area, and then you start talking to people in the villages and you become friends with them. If villages lot, what happened in Kashmir in the 90s when the first bit of militancy happened. They burnt all the bridges that they had, the small culverts going to their villages across the stream. They burnt
Okay.
everything. They burnt schools. They burnt bus stops. So by 95, 96, when you wanted your apples to be moved, it was very tiresome because you had to cross each nala. There was no culvert. So then we used to go and offer that, okay, we'll build you a culvert. We'll help you with the culvert. We'll get a dozer and it'll do some work for you. You build it. You give us this thing. So you build up your friendship with them, some amount of cooperation. And so that gives, they say, okay, these are the good people. So they give you some amount of information comes out. Somebody drops it by mistake, he tells you this is happening there, or don't go that side, or this is some problem here. So then you start correlating stuff, and information comes from a whole lot of source, whole lot of directions. And so you have to just sort of mix and match. And so you need to work on that. I mean, it's something which a lot of people sit and they sort of analyze it, and then only you come and you say, okay, this is what's happening. You have a broader picture, you have a smaller picture, you know exactly what is there, and then you have your focus area. So it's one of those things.
So as an army person, like you build your own sources with the common citizens and all those. Same way, I would believe that militants also build their sources in those same regions, and where army is going to conduct a raid or what is going to happen.
Most of
So,
the militants are from those areas. So they have
okay.
their own relatives who will tell them if you are coming. So what happens is, for example, when the army moves, the moment
Hmm.
they leave their barracks, the moment they leave
Hmm.
their post, some in Kashmir, it's it can be anywhere actually, even in the northeast. Northeast, it's even more this thing because it's tribal. So the moment the army leaves a post, that message goes out that they have left and they're going in this direction. Now, in the mountains in Northeast, it's very difficult to
Hmm.
turn around and go somewhere else. It's a very tough thing to do. So you probably leave at night. You do it very quietly without anybody coming to know. You come out from somewhere else and go off and don't hit the main road. A whole lot of things. Similarly, in the valley, it used to be that okay, you went in one direction, then you backtracked, then you went somewhere else, and so people wouldn't know where you actually are. That's the aim. They wouldn't be able to track you for that much time. That's how you do it. That's how
Okay.
we did it, should I say.
So, sir, I had Colonel Tushar Joshi on the show. He was also part of the NSG which conducted that operation in Akshardham Mandir in Gujarat. So
Okay,
he was ultimately who killed the militants, uh, the terrorists. So he told me that he has also served in J&K and Northeast. So
right.
I asked him one question that Colonel Joshi, which is your favorite terrain where you have served? I mean, when you not favorite in terms of operations and all that. I mean, fall in love with a place, right? And then I asked him which is the most difficult terrain which you have served in. So his answer was it was Northeast
Yeah,
for
because
both the questions.
Northeast is the even Kashmir is very beautiful. There's no
Yeah.
doubt about it. I mean, that's why we have such a high tourism this thing there. Kashmir is easier to operate in because you're basically working in a valley,
Hmm.
and if you go into the jungles, it's or you have to climb the hill because a lot of the areas there are those are slightly different. No, but the main places are in the valley, so transportation is much easier. Reaching a place is much easier. In northeast, firstly you have the weather which is very difficult, very sultry. So you have a lot of the moment you go into a jungle, you have you start sweating and stuff like that, and it gets then navigation is very difficult.
Right.
Whatever you're doing, sometimes you don't have contact, so you can't even get into a GPS and see where you are. So and then in the jungle, and then walking through jungle itself, you don't want to follow a foot track sometimes because you don't know who'll ambush you on that. So if
Yeah.
you're going cutting through jungle, which is, or let's say we've been through some bamboo forests and stuff, you can take about an hour to do maybe 50 meters, 30 meters, 40 meters. It takes you an hour. So you walk. I mean, it can be very tough. So there's no doubt about it that Kashmir is far easier to operate in. In terms of beauty, I think where there is no insurgency and where there's nothing and calm and quiet and things, both areas are very beautiful. There are very beautiful areas everywhere. I used to stay in. I was posted in a place. My company was located in a place called Kasam Kulen in Manipur, and you were top of a hill, and you had the clouds going below you. So you can
Oh,
imagine how beautiful that whole area is. But yes, to reach your post and to go away from there, you had to calculate because it was very easy to get ambushed. There were ambushes which happened to units before us, and there were ambushes which happened to units after us, where they lost 15, 20 people at a time. So it's a tough call. Northeast is a tough call.
okay. So, sir, as you discussed about J&K, the issues in J&K. So, what are the issues in Northeast? I mean, there also we have a lot of militant issues which have been going on with one or the other groups out there against the army.
So Northeast, I think it's been more complicated with the Naga insurgency that happened earlier,
Yeah,
with the Mizo insurgency which happened earlier, the fact that Manipur also started off, but to a large extent, most of these had started coming under control. Even Manipur, which is the last one of them, actually, had more or less come under control till all these things happened, where the Metis and the Kukis started fighting, and this attack on the Kukis and whatever. And now there have been a whole lot of militants who have gained ground because the government has lost control. Otherwise, for a long time, I personally, in fact, with some friends, with some colleagues of mine, we've written a paper for the Center for Land Warfare, in which on the Northeast, called Rainbow Country, something like that. In that, we've talked again about the business of insurgency, why nobody wants the insurgency to stop, but it's not too high. So you keep the status quo going, so people are happy, everybody is making his money, and the only people who have a difficult time in that is the local, the poor guy
right.
who's in the village farming this that, because he can't actually fight the democratic system because he's always made to feel, okay, you'll be searched, this will happen to
Hmm.
you, that will happen to you. So in those circumstances, it gets a bit tough, shall I say. So
Okay.
that's basically money. The Northeast was coming along very well. Now it's been pushed back by a decade or two, I think, and especially because the central government has not acted. That is actually, I don't know why they have not acted. They must be having information as to not act, or they must be having their own reasons for it. But overall, it has spoiled the complete social structure that exists, the complete cooperation and things that were there, and a large number of especially the Methi community, which has gone very very after the cookies. The one thing I have to say is that the cookies were always pro-India. The Methis and the Nagas in Manipur always wanted a separate. Nagas wanted a separate to join up with Greater Nagaland, which would
Hmm.
join up with Nagaland as well, their areas. But the Methi insurgents in those days, in the 90s and all, were looking for a independent homeland. So now they have been given leeway, which by the state, which is I don't. I'm certain the government must have realized, and the government must have realized, but by now that this isn't so much a fight between Methis and Cookies. It is an attempt to clear up an area so that a separate homeland could become a reality for the Methis. The Cookies, by the way, are not liked by the Nagas and the Methis only because they are completely pro-Indian. So they have been always seen as people who give away information to the military. They are
Okay.
always working in tandem with the military. It's always been that, and that is where they have actually lost out.
So, with this, all these surgical strikes happening in the, do you see that there is any change in J&K or the Northeast region after this, with this current government?
See, I think surgical strikes happened before the government came in. They were done in the Earlier years,
Hmm.
they have only thing that has happened is that now it was given a lot of publicity. Actually, with what they've achieved, I really don't know. I really can't say because you hear very conflicting versions of the whole thing. Must have deterred to some extent, I have no doubts. Some deterrence value it would have of that because you can get hit. So when
Yeah.
in Kashmir, say for example, when they bring them up to the border and they keep them there to before they can push them into India. So wherever they're keeping them, if they know that this is it's been seen, it's forced them into probably keeping their people further away, more deeper inside, not so much, not so close to the border, which impacts the way they can come in.
Yeah.
You see, if you are far away, then to come inside, you have to be coming in at night. So when you're coming in, that becomes vulnerability because some transport is seen coming in. And if you were trying to creep in, only a few people can go through. If you want to send a large body of troops, it can't happen. That's one part of it. So there is obviously an impact. I mean, there is always an impact in anything that you do. And
Okay.
along the LOC, in any case, the units deployed along the LOC have always, I mean, sometimes the Pakistan army has come into our areas and ambushed somebody or done something. Then the unit which is on this side, because they want to push you down, right? They want to dominate you. So then a similar action has been taken by us, by that unit, and gone across and done some action there. These things keep happening. Right now, I
Okay.
don't think because there was a sort of a peace thing going on, but I think a couple of days there's been some action happening somewhere. People are talking
So
about.
with so much of experience in the army and with so much operations that you have gone through, uh, could you please share with us, I mean, some of the, moments which could have been probably life threatening for you, or some of the operations that you had, I mean, out of the so many operations that you mentioned, of the insurgencies, any of the operation which still, has a place in your heart and mind?
There are a lot of them actually, but they are not things which I would like to dwell on too much. If
Okay.
I have to actually talk about life-threatening situation, is that I had come from Manipur. I had come on leave and to Calcutta, and I was going to
Okay.
meet my wife somewhere. And when I was supposed to be there for I had only been given a week's leave, and those days the flight from M.Phil to Calcutta was only on Saturdays.
Okay.
So I came on a Saturday, and I was supposed to get back the next Saturday. And that time my wife fell ill, and so I asked for permission to stay longer. But my message never reached the unit because those days, 90s, the
Hmm.
thing was fairly, you couldn't get through on a phone. There was a lot of difficulties, and the telegrams I sent, nothing happened. So I had no choice but to get back on the flight and come back. So on the next Saturday, I took the flight and got back. And I was quite
Okay.
unhappy about it. And a week later, the same flight, while coming in to land the Indian Airlines Air India flight, coming in to land in Imphal, went and banged into a tree, into a hill, and everybody died,
Oh.
including the deputy chief minister. And I found myself leading the team which was going for rescue because it was very bad weather, and we were called
Oh.
down near. There's a place called Loktak. There's a Loktak Lake, which is a huge lake there, and there's some very high features behind that. And it had banged into that. They suspected it had banged into that, and nobody was being able to go up. So we had a team with me. I had a team which went up there, and we found the crash site. So that is life threatening in the sense that I was lucky. Otherwise, I would have been
Yeah.
coming back the next week. So who knows?
Right.
So in that sense, otherwise you have always you know uh, you any operation can go wrong anywhere. So you can end up being shot by your own people. You can end up being making a mistake yourself and things like that. I mean, it's very easy. Somebody is you may have gone to the wrong place. You may have so any operation you're on is there is nothing. I mean, you remember this recent these people who died in that in Kashmir when they went where they had some
Yeah.
information and the police officer and the CEO of the unit died. Unfortunately, it's like that. I mean, you could just miss out something, or you could just get everything. So everything is on a balance. You really don't know. And where live ammunition is there, arms, people are firing at you in anger, you never know when you are in the way.
Yeah.
It can happen.
Okay. Uh, so my last question to you would be: what does army life really teach you, other than leadership qualities and all that? What does an army life teach you? I mean, when you have left your army, obviously there are qualities that you still would have, carried on from your army when you served in the army. So, what are those qualities, and what exactly does to your mindset?
That's an interesting one because, okay, I'll put it this way, that you have to, first and foremost, because you live in a disciplined society, it it brings on to you. It's not so much somebody else telling you that you must do this, or with a stick telling you to do this. A lot of what happens is a lot of self discipline gets ingrained. There are things you will not do because it's
Okay.
not supposed to be done.
Uh,
If somewhere it says that you're not supposed to step on grass, you won't step on grass because there's a board. Somebody has in his wisdom put up a board saying, we want to save this grass, it looks nice, so please don't step on grass. People will not step on grass. So there is one question of self-discipline. Self-discipline also adds to the understanding and importance of time. Time becomes, I mean, as you know, in the one of the biggest things, and I'm after leaving the army, I left the army in 2008, right? So this is 14 years later. I mean, so
right.
I've worked in the corporate world. I'm still working with the Observer Research Foundation, let's say. So I know. I mean, so time, the importance which in Civi Street, the importance given to time is far less than what in the army it is. Even at 70, I'm not. I'm there at a place 5 minutes before time.
Right.
Any function that I have to attend in the army, I know it will happen on time. It won't be delayed. If it is
Yeah.
delayed for some reason, there will be enough this thing given as to why it's happened, and
Yeah.
people will also be apologetic about it or whatever. But I'm saying on a basic thing. So time, if you're not, if you're casual about time, people don't realize how important it is.
Right.
But it's in fact, I think Field Marshal Manekshaw talked about it. You're committing a crime if you are not on time, because you're making people wait, you're making people do things. There is a lot of things which you could have done in that time. It's something which people look at you and say, okay, he's here. And somebody comes in 1.5 hours late, and you say, okay, especially there are these political meetings which happen where somebody comes in, or somebody has to address a rally, or somebody has to
Mm.
address a school, and a politician comes in and he comes in late. So those things happen. So then for a student to see that and say that, look, he's not on time, I mean, it's a, you take it, it's not ingrained into you. So that's very important. Most of all, I think what happens is that you learn to think for yourself. You learn to look at the bigger picture, and you learn to sort of relate to everybody else. So you're not looking at divisions to them. You're not looking at,
Mm.
this chap's caste or this chap's religion or whatever. You those things are not important. If
Right.
he's by your side, he's your chap. I've had in my company in Manipur, I had a young boy from my unit who was a Muslim, and during
Mm.
when Ramzan started, he used to keep his fast. But when we were doing operations, it weakened him very fast. So automatically, he didn't want to get out of it, because it was a question of self-respect as well. He says that, why should I stop doing operation when I'm there, and I'll also go along with everybody else. But then it came on to me that I said, okay, let me think of somehow I can use him in a different manner. So I employed him in a manner where he was uh, not that physically required to work in that physical this thing, and I was able to ensure that he was okay. That he was still doing an important job. He didn't feel that he was doing an unimportant job. These are things which you start looking at. You become to a large extent selfless because others matter. Your
Right.
buddies matter, your friends matter, your company, somebody matters. The army, you have those famous saying that, okay, first you look after your troops and then only you look after yourself. You first feed them. I mean, if you have food, if you arrange stuff, you do it first for them and then do it for others. So that, or for yourself, then only you start yourself. So that, those are the things which once you start it gets ingrained in you. It doesn't go away in civil speed.
Sir, this is a very light question, and it's a personal question that I have. So, having served in the army, then having served in an MNC, right?
Right.
So, what is a work culture that you find, and where you have to, where you had to, okay, adjust to it? Because army life teaches you discipline, timeliness, compassion, prioritize tasks, and all that. Handle pressure and everything. Then comes a MNC setup where everything is asked is said to be this is priority, this is priority. So how did you manage and get to strike that balance?
So you have. I mean, I was fortunate. I took over a company as the in India of an MNC, which was just starting off in India. They first had an
Okay.
American guy who was looking after it. It was a security integration company, set cameras and stuff like that. So, but he was not able to cut it. I mean, he was finding India a very difficult place to understand. This is in Bangalore, and I came in there, and for one, I had no problems with anybody because they knew that whatever I said is what I meant. I never said that, okay, if somebody came and told me I have difficulty in doing this, I'd say, okay, what do you want me to do? How do we deal with it? So we had no issues. I mean, I seriously had no issues with anybody. There were a couple of people who wanted to leave, let's say, and who didn't tell me, or they broke my trust. But an odd person like that is everywhere. It's in the army also. It's not that it's not there. So you can't change your attitude towards everybody else based on that. In
Right.
getting work done, in running a team, whether it's corporate or whether it's the army, there's certain things which you have to do. For getting loyalty, you have to be loyal.
Right.
You have to, the chap has to be convinced that you care for him, that what you're doing is not about you, but about everybody. You're looking after the team. So all those things still matter. I mean, whether in corporate, anywhere, they are how you run a thing. So I don't think, yes, there are differences which I can go into, but they are very minor differences. Like in the army, for example, the army, when you have a project, you're doing a project, and you're
Hmm.
the chap who's doing the project as the, let's say, the head of the project, whatever team, unit, subunit, whatever. So whether there is, if it is a very successful thing, and everybody compliments you, and you say, look, not only me, the rest of the team also did a lot of it, right? But uh, and a lot of people do that in civil street as well. Corporate also people do that. But
Yeah.
in corporate, there is a slightly different attitude. Is where if you something is going wrong, and you have, say, an engineer there or a technician there who's not doing the work properly, then you're not protecting him. You're not. I mean, in the army, you would protect him. You would try and convince him, change him, work with him, whatever, to make him also come onto your line, or then you would throw him out. But in civil street, you're not. If you protect him, then people think that you're doing, that you're as inefficient as that guy.
Right.
That problem is there. So in the army, when you look after an organization, you don't take. I mean, you take responsibility if things go wrong. You say it's my fault. I should have been able to. But in civil street, you don't do that. You don't say it's my fault. Then you point out that these are the things that went wrong, and these are the people who actually messed up, and these are the people I'm going to get rid of, whatever it is.
So it's that silver lining between the definition of a leader and a boss.
Right. Okay. In a sense, in the army, it's very different, because in the army, a leader has to be willing to do what he's asking his men to do.
Right.
He
Yeah.
has to do it. If he's not there, you can't lead from the back.
Exactly.
So, I mean, there is different levels of leadership. The COs, the commanding officers in a battalion is sitting at the back, and he's giving orders to his companies to do something. But everybody in that company knows that when he was a company commander, he's done exactly the same thing.
Hmm.
Or if he was a platoon commander, he's done exactly the same thing. He's faced the same stuff. So if he's asking you to do it, if somebody has to do a room entry, there is a time when I've also done a room entry. So if I tell somebody we need to enter this room, it may be dangerous, but he knows that okay, we've done this. That kind of thing. If I'm jumping out of
Thank
an aircraft, I should be there. I mean, I must jump out. I can't tell others to jump out, and I'll sit
exactly.
down and watch.
Exactly.
That kind of stuff. That's the basic thing from the army leadership point of view. I
Yeah.
won't talk about in civilian. This thing that's more management actually you're doing, right?
Yeah.
Trying to get the work out of people, some amount of leadership, but mainly it's management.
Thank you, Deepak sir. It's always an honor and a pleasure to speak with someone from the armed forces. There is so much to learn. There is so much to talk. I mean, if we don't put a timeline to the podcast, it would just go on and on
Right.
because we have such a dearth of experience.
I hope I haven't talked too much.
We would love to hear more from you, sir.
Okay.
But okay, we'll keep it for some other day.
Right.
And
Thank you so
thank you,
much.
Deepak sir.
It's been a pleasure.
It was a memorable and pleasure. I mean, honor for me to have you on the show, and I hope it was a pleasurable experience for
Very
you as
kind
well.
of you. Very kind of you, and thank you very much. Very good interaction. I enjoyed it. Okay. See you again.
Thank you, sir.
Bye bye. All the best.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.